front line of policing is loud, but the voices behind it, they're a lot louder and I think, frankly, a lot more interesting. Hi, I'm Bob Plaschke, and this is First Response. This is the number one podcast that takes you behind the badge and uncovers real stories and experiences of first responders from all walks of life and the topics that shape public safety today. If you're curious about the guy or the gal behind the hero, and they are indeed truly heroes, and the topics that they care about, take a listen. This is kind of your front row seat to hearing some of the really interesting voices out there, and more importantly, the heroes. This podcast is sponsored by Pepperball, where I have the honor to serve as CEO. Pepperball creates non-lethal alternatives to guns police use to keep themselves and the public safe. So today, super excited, joined by Chief Scott Hughes. Chief is the chief of police of the Hamilton Township in Warr County, Ohio. It's just north of Cincinnati. And being born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, Cincinnati was always the rival city. It was always the big city, actually, when we were in Louisville. So it's fun to talk to someone close to where I grew up. Chief has been the chief there since 2016. He's got a decades-long and wonderful experience in policing, and spends a lot of his time, his off time, on the road doing consulting, helping other agencies across the country really understand the challenges that they're facing, whether it be leadership or training, and help them kind of come to the solutions that they can control and enact in their own local agencies. Chief Hughes is a graduate of the FBI National Academy, which is a very prestigious part of the training that a select set of chiefs get to go through, and has a number of degrees in topics at or relating to public safety and policing. So, Chief, when we were talking before, you mentioned you like to tell or like to help the folks that don't have a lot of experience in policing kind of understand why police officers do what they do. Here's my first question. When I take a police officer out to lunch or to a meeting, they always want to have the chair that has the back, has the kind of their chair backs to the back of the restaurant. Mm-hmm. So why do they do that? Why do they do that?
Well, first of all, Bob, thanks for having me on your program. It's an honor to be here. Yeah, that is a classic. You can always tell when you walk into the restaurant who the cops are, because they don't have their back to the door. We are brought up in a environment where situational awareness is critical. We want to be that first line of defense, and we are in this constant state of what I'm going to call hypervigilance, where we are always on the lookout for threats, and we never want to be caught off guard. So anytime you're going to see us in a public place, you can expect somebody in that group's job is to watch the door and watch the surroundings. In fact, when I first started dating my wife, it drove her nuts. Now her and our two children, they just know. Don't even try to sit in that chair or in that booth where your father can't see the door. And if we're really feeling paranoid, we're going to ask to be seated close to an exit. So in case we have to make a quick escape, we have a direct route. So yeah, it just comes from the training in the experiences that you never want to get caught off guard. We are protectors. We want to protect everyone. Well, we can't protect them if we don't have the upper hand. So that is a classic law enforcement thing. That's an official cop term thing. You don't sit with your back to the door. So next time you go out and you see 3 or 4 police officers in uniform and they're forced to sit at a round table, probably rank or paper, rock, scissors picked who has to sit with their back to the door. So, yeah.
I appreciate that. It's when I first started to serve or sell to and meet with police officers, the first couple of times I would I would take the seat furthest away to out of courtesy, could it make them not have to walk as far. And the first couple of dinners, these poor police chiefs sitting there, and they were just noticeably uncomfortable. And finally, I think it was my second or third time, one of my advisors, who was a former police chief, Chris Moore from San Jose, he pulled me aside and he said, could you be any more rude? Like, rude? What? He goes, police officers, to your point, they need, they're constantly vigilant, and so you're making them uncomfortable. So why don't you be respectful and give them the chair?
that or you got to carry the gun.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like one or the other.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, does that follow you to, when you're out watching a baseball game, when you're out? I mean, this is something I always have deep sympathy for. I can't say empathy because I'm not a police officer, but sympathy in the sense when you're in public, I guess you're always hypervigilant, even when you're on your free time.
You really are. And, you just, unfortunately, with what goes on in society today, we, like I said before, we have to stay hypervigilant because we want to be able to detect these threats. And, there's also another side of that argument. And that is that constant state of hypervigilance. And there's a lot of experts out there that get way more educated and smarter than me on this topic. So I'll give you enough to sound like I know what I'm talking about. And that is that this constant state of hypervigilance actually can be unhealthy for you. And what I mean by that is the added stress, what that stress does to your cortisol and just your heart, just everything, right? There's a ton of folks that need to come on here and they can explain what all that actually does to you internally, but it does add stress because you never really get to relax, right? Like you never get to just calm down. I mean, even on a quote unquote vacation, you're on a beach with people, you're scanning around, you're looking, you never really get to let your guard down. And, that's just kind of, I don't want to say it comes with the job, but it kind of just comes with the job. I mean, I think
it comes with the job. I mean,
yeah.
I think, and it's unique to police officers. There's correction officers who I think to some degree can contain that because theirs is based on a facility, and firefighters don't have that same issue. They don't really feel that kind of stress because for them, absent of a fire or a health issue, they aren't really looking for it. They're more reactive. And I think for me, I've just become super appreciative. It's one of the few professions that I can think of that has that constant stress, even, kind of on the job, off the job, on vacation, traveling. It comes with the job, but it's a huge sacrifice, a physical and mental sacrifice that officers make when they swear an oath to the badge.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And there's been a lot of cases. When I say a lot, I can't quantify that number, but there's been cases in the news over the last several years where, good Samaritans in the right spot have ended threats or, have been phenomenal witnesses that have led to the arrest or, apprehension of folks. And, it's not just really police officers. We need everyone to kind of remain vigilant, right? Especially with what's going on in the world today. And, right or wrong, there's people out there that don't like us. You never know where you're going to be and, what might occur. So to some degree, you want everyone to remain vigilant. What law enforcement officers do is, I guess, we're just a little more extra vigilant when we're around those that may not be as vigilant. How's that?
Well, and again, I just think it's it's a simple question, but it leads to a bunch of outcomes that you don't think about, which is the stress that police officers sit under. One of the topics, there'll be two things we'll talk about today. One is the work you do in terms of helping people understand use of force and when you used it and when you can avoid it and how to think about that. But the other topic, was one of a blog that you recently wrote. It talked about we call policing a profession, which it definitely is, but we don't treat it like I think you use the reference like a major league profession, right? Where, those athletes have the trainers, the mental health, the physical, all the tools they need. And in a policing context, when you have people that are literally hold life and death in their hands every day, they don't get that same level of training. So on that topic, let me just open the floor to you. What is the state of policing today in terms of getting the right level of training? Is it going in the right direction, the wrong direction? What needs to happen?
I think that's a very loaded question. I'm going to sound like I'm talking out both sides of my mouth, so I hope your viewers will understand. This is a very complex question. Let me start off by saying this. Here in my state of Ohio, to be a police officer, it takes approximately 740-ish hours to complete the police academy, right? 740, 750, somewhere in that range. For sake of just argument, we're going to say less than 800. That's fair. It takes 1,800 hours in my state to be a barber, and it takes 1,500 hours in my state to be a cosmetologist. That is nothing. I'm not downplaying what it takes to be a barber or cosmetologist, because I've never done that job. What I have done since the mid-90s is law enforcement. And I can tell you that the situations that we are thrusted into and decisions that we are expected to make, there's no room for error. And in law enforcement, we've seen this around the country where officers are vilified, criminally charged, et cetera, for quote unquote making an error, when we're not giving them the types of training to not make those errors. To your point about that blog post that I wrote, my comparison to the Major League Baseball team is this. I've heard that an average Major League Baseball player shows up to a baseball stadium 6 to 8 hours before the game starts. And in that time frame, they'll do everything from have a meal to work with a physical trainer, getting stretched, getting loose. They will do fundamental exercises to include batting practice, ground balls. They'll do fielding exercises. They watch film. They'll stretch again 6 to 8 hours before the game starts. And the reason they do that is because these individuals have one job, and that job is go out there on that field and do the best job that they can do. Major League Baseball players are conditioned to never make an error. That's why when a routine fly ball gets dropped in the outfield, that's why every sports channel is replaying it over and over and over again, because that baseball player is trained to never let that happen. We give our officers minimal ongoing training on fundamentals, right? We give them very minimal. So then we give them things like, watch this video online, watch this webinar. And that's just check the box training. We don't give them stress inoculation where we're making it like second nature, if you will, right? A baseball player, you can see this analogy, right, Bob? Like baseball player, fly ball off the bat, he knows where he reads it off the bat, he knows where to go. It's just another catch, right? We're not conditioned in law enforcement to that same standard. So I compare, you want us to be Major League Baseball players and never make an error in law enforcement, but you give us T-ball training. My 12-year-old does fundamentals 45 minutes to an hour and a half before every one of his baseball games at 12 years old. The average police officer shows up, 15, 20 minutes before his shift starts, goes into roll call, gets briefing, and then he has to go out and start answering calls. Right.
Yep.
And he's not. So now your listeners are like, well, what's the answer? What's the answer? What's the answer? Well, I think that's the loaded question. That's where it gets very, very complicated, because I think it comes from several different sources. The first one, the elephant in the room, is somebody's got to pay for it.
Yep.
Somebody's got to pay for the funding to pull officers from the streets, backfill it with overtime, so that the officers can get that kind of training, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think the profession as a whole is not designed to give us the kind of training we need. Now, when I say the kind of training we need, I mean instinctive responses where cops don't have to think about it. Well, the only way you can do that is constant, ongoing, daily, right? daily type of training. Again, back to my baseball analogy, other than the 4 or 6 teams that are still left in the majors right now in this season, all the other baseball players, they're back at their homes doing what they do in their off season. But I guarantee you this, every day they're doing something baseball related to stay ready for the upcoming season.
Yep.
We don't do that in law enforcement, right? So that's kind of the miss. But then again, when an officer goes out here and he makes a traffic stop at 2:00 in the morning, it's pitch black, and he engages in a foot pursuit, and the suspect turns around and points something at him like that real fast, and he pulls his gun, he doesn't realize, is that a gun or was that the cover to the camera? Like,
right.
And they make those split-second decisions. So a long-winded answer, or a long-winded statement, I guess, to your question with probably no answer other than law enforcement is notorious, absolutely notorious for whatever the big pressing issue is. That's what we're going to start training in that. Right. So, a couple years ago, it was all about de-escalation. We've been de-escalating before the word de-escalation ever came into play. Right. It's just communication. All de-escalation, all that is communication. And there's a group of people who think that de-escalation is this magical say this, don't say that, like use this phrase and this will always de-escalate people. And that's not reality. You're dealing with individuals who are under the influence of alcohol, drugs, suffering from mental illness, a combination of all three. You can be the nicest person you can, and they're not going to be de-escalated. So somewhere along the way, there was a group of folks that felt like, well, officers should de-escalate every situation. We have police departments putting words in policies like officers must de-escalate. Well, that's not fair to the cops. They must de-escalate, but we're only going to give you 20 hours of training for the entire year. And that's going to be on everything but de-escalation. If we do give you de-escalation training, you're going to watch a webinar, check a box and say you were trained, but that's not going to be the realities of the street. So I digress.
No. I mean, I think you're just articulating, you had said on earlier before we started, you said it's the same crap, different badge. Is that every
same crap, different patch. Yeah.
Different patch. Sorry,
yeah.
Patch.
Yeah.
And which means that, because I hear the same theme across the country as I visit police chiefs in my work. And one, I can only think of maybe the vast majority of the agencies I visit are understaffed, and they've been understaffed since COVID and since George Floyd. Mm-hmm. Being understaffed, and and that is with the 700 hours or 800 hours of training. They have to get people through the academies and get them through and get them trained. So they've got their existing staff is facing lots of overtime, which is additional stress, where they before used to have the old, you think about what you see on TV where you have the old grizzled veteran sitting shotgun with the new guy. That doesn't happen. These new guys are on their own, and
kids training kids.
Kids training kids. And you have, and then I think the range of issues that police face now versus 20 years ago is, almost 2x in terms of mental illness, mental challenges, societal challenges, the type of protests, and finally, not to add it, kind of sell past the close, but you have unfortunately you have a group of citizens who are, unfortunately, trust has dropped. I think trust in public safety has dropped, and police officers dropped below 50% for the first time ever, where the majority of people do not have a sense of full trust in the police officer, which makes the job even harder.
The other thing we have is we as a profession, law enforcement should not be going to some of the calls that we are sent to. We should not be I don't know who else to call, so I just called 911 and, we have to go. That is another area in this profession that needs to be addressed. The issue is nobody knows what's the answer, right? Like, am I going to be liable if I don't go and something happens? What if, if here's an example. If there's a guy or a gal in their house by themselves and they've called 911 and said, I am suicidal. Sir, is there anyone else in the house with you? No, I'm by myself. Okay, if the officers can verify there's no one else in that house, it is a suicidal threat, not a homicidal threat. What's law enforcement supposed to do? Right? And because here's what's going to happen. If we go to that call, it's going to turn into a barricaded situation. We're going to notify the SWAT team. SWAT's going to come out. Some SWAT teams are going to do what's called a surround and call out. They're going to surround the house. They're not going to go in. They're going to yell on the bullhorn for hours. They're going to fire tear gas, pepper balls into the house and try to get the individual to come out. If they don't come out, we're going to send a robot in. If the robot doesn't find them, eventually we're going to send police officers in, and then they're going to find them. And now the officers are going to have to be forced to use deadly threat because the guy or gal is going to charge at them with a knife. Then that family, the estate, is going to sue law enforcement, and they're going to say we caused his death, or whatever the case might be, or worse, a cop's going to get hurt or killed.
Correct.
Why are we even there? So we have to stop using law enforcement as this last resort and forcing these guys with 740 hours. We are not mental health experts. We are not trained to go to these homes and talk about feelings and beliefs and this kind of stuff. We're cops. And that's part of that whole big problem. So I will digress again.
No, but I think it's reality, and it's what it's, and we hear it again and again on this podcast is police chiefs coming in and just articulating the challenges. To your point previously, the industry's made great strides in servicing the issues around mental health and putting mental health training and kind of a buddy system as best one can do, and having mental health professionals available for police officers. So that's been I think an improvement.
Yes.
And the acknowledgement that those mental health issues are there. I think I've seen the focus on your personal health and the facilities and the training, so you can get the physical training that you need, and frankly the kind of a way to burn off a lot of the stress through physical exercise. I've seen improvements there. Right. I think but they're to some degree they're band-aids to a much larger challenge, which is, as you've described, a set of circumstances that officers are not trained to deal with. They have to, because they're the only people that answer 911, but you don't want them to do it. Turning our attention, at least I'd like to turn and talk about this notion of use of force. I try to explain to my friends, and I say, look, the police officer's been trained and the majority of their training talks about how to de-escalate a situation, how to communicate, and how to, only if necessary, increase the use of force to gain control of the situation. And I try to talk about it in the sense of that their focus is to gain control of the situation. And it may or may not lead to an arrest, but it's get control so that the safety of the officer, the safety of the subject you're dealing with, and the people around them, you focus on that first. But with that as a context, can you describe when you hear the word use of force and increasing use of force, what does that mean? How should we as a non-officer think about that?
Every use of force begins because of three words that the individual causes. Well, let me say that again. Individuals cause officers to use force because of three words: failure to comply. Every use of force would be preventable if individuals complied. Right. So let's just say that right now. Right. All the cases that you've seen around this country, whether they're, no matter what they are, it started with an individual did not comply. So we got to put some of the responsibility back on the individuals who are putting our officers in these positions. Okay.
Yep.
The use of force by law has to be what's called objectively reasonable, right? So, again, this is a much, much, much more longer in-depth, conversation, and there's a lot of folks out there that are way smarter than me. But in essence, every force that we have to use, we want to try to accomplish an arrest using the least amount of force as possible. Now, that doesn't mean it's always going to work, right? There's a portion, if you will, of population who, because of TV, movies, their own self-belief, they think that every time you use any type of less than lethal weapon, whether it's a taser, a pepper ball, an baton, other technology that's out there, that will always work. And you're the CEO of the company of Pepperball. Hey, that's not always the case, right? We know that there's a high percentage of cases that do resolve themselves, but not every one of them. So for a police officer, if my intent is I'm going to go with this less lethal option, if it doesn't work, there's only most likely one other option then if the less lethal option doesn't work, right? Nowhere does it say that a police officer has to get injured, hurt, or certainly killed to defend themselves or someone else. And, this does not sound sexy or politically correct to some, but the only way to overcome violence is more superior violence, right? I mean, again, that doesn't sound like that's not friendly, but that's the reality. I mean, if someone's punching you and punching you and punching you and fighting, you have to be a better fighter to win. Using force is no different. The issue for law enforcement is we're not street fighters, right? So, I mean, we're not just out there just throwing haymakers, just, going, we do try to follow some sort of a system or some sort of a policy, but you can have all the policies and procedures in the world. And the reality is this: use of force is ugly. I have a friend of mine who often says the only place the use of force looks good is in the mat room. The mat room is where cops are trained, on the mats, right? That's the only place it looks good. On the street, it never looks good. Yep. There's so many variables that you're concerned about on the side of the road. And until you stood next to a car and you're trying to put someone's hands behind their back who don't want their hands behind their back, or until you've tried to break up a fight where people are screaming and they're jumping in and they don't want to be separated, until you've been in that position, it's hard for anyone to truly understand what it's like. It's kind of like, back to my baseball analogy, it's kind of like me sitting on the couch a couple weeks ago, watching my favorite baseball team yelling, "Swing the bat." You don't know what 104 mile an hour four-seam fastball looks like coming out of someone's hand. And then the next pitch is an 80 mile an hour changeup. Like, who am I? Like, you don't know what that's like to stand there. And again, I'm a firm believer in this, and this, some are just going to not believe me at all. And some might actually turn off the podcast after I say this, but I'm a firm believer that most police officers, the overwhelming majority of them, get in this profession for the right reasons and come out here every single day and they do the right thing for the right reasons. I believe we do a really good job of holding those who need to be held accountable. I also think we do a bad job sometimes at explaining why cops do what they do, which is why when you reached out to me, yes, sign me up. Let me get on. As I told you before we recorded, the more folks that I can talk to who will listen to my dumb brain here, the better, right? The more folks that I can hopefully help educate, especially non-law enforcement folks. I do this when I travel the country speaking and whatnot. I always do this analogy. I always ask, right? Not analogy. I always do this exercise, Bob. And that exercise is this. I always ask those in the room to point their fingers at me like they have a gun in their hand. Okay. So I'll get the whole room to point their finger at me. And then I take my gun and I point it at my own head. And I tell the audience this: I'm going to say the alphabet from the letter A to the letter D as in donkey. When I get to D as in donkey, I'm taking this gun that's currently pointed at my head and I'm going to point it at you. All you have to do is yell bang. That's it. I'm going to say the A, B, C, D, just like you were taught in preschool. There's no tricks, I promise. So they all got their fingers pointed at me. They're all ready to go. And I go A, B, C, D, and I point my finger at them. And every one of them is late at yelling bang. And I say to them, you did not beat me. And I hear things like, well, that was fast. Well, yeah, that's law enforcement, right? Like you knew when I was going to take this gun from my own head and point it at you. Now, can you imagine an officer makes a traffic stop and a guy jumps out of his car and he's got he's got a gun to his head like this, and the police officer gets out of the car and goes, boom, 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 boom. He would be criticized to the end of the world. Well, why'd you shoot him? The gun was pointed at himself. He wasn't a threat to you. I just proved to you how quick I can do that. An officer on the street doesn't know if I'm going to take the gun from my head and point it at D as in donkey, Q as in queen, Z as in zebra, A. He doesn't know when he's going to do it. And nowhere does it say that I should have to wait and see what he's going to do before I decide to use force or defend myself or someone else. So that same friend that tells me the use of force only looks good on the mat also says that law enforcement's the hardest job in America. And I agree. It's hardest job in America. And as a profession, we've got so much work to do with how we're training. And it's a much deeper issue than, just money and it's how it's scheduling it. It's everything, when you said it a couple times, law enforcement training. I don't know if we're trained or if we've gathered information, right? Like to be trained to where it's second nature, we're back to that whole Major League Baseball player analogy or any sport for that matter. So, we are making progress. We got a lot of work to do. I feel like sometimes we just kick the can down the road. I think there's some chiefs and some executives who just hope it doesn't happen here. And that's probably the wrong mindset to have. That's not my style. I'm going to do what I can at my department and worry about my people. Try to have this influence through podcasts like yours to get people thinking. But, I say this is still without a doubt, I believe the greatest job in America. If we don't support the men and women who are out here doing it, if we don't defend them, we're going to have nobody left to do it. We saw what happened when you defund and you do away with these departments and you start down that road, you have complete anarchy. I believe in what's called the thin blue line. I don't believe in the political part of the thin blue line. I think the thin blue line is what separates good from bad and from those that want to commit evil. It's sitting with your back, not to the door, so you can spot that evil, quite honestly. And, I think we have to stick up for this profession or nobody's going to want to do it. And then we're going to be in a world of hurt.
Oh, for sure. And I think, as you said, trying to educate folks like myself and folks who are not in the profession to understand what a police officer deals with so that when they get pulled over, they will comply. Because, that is, as you said, if someone does not comply with instructions, then the use of force progression begins, and it's an escalation clock of which the officer is to defend himself and herself and around this and the folks around them. They're forced to. They can't just turn around and get in the car and drive off.
Well, you talk about traffic stops, and just real quick, if I may, I have a saying that is this. I want officers to be prepared, not paranoid, right? I need you out here prepared, but not paranoid to where you can't do the job. Having said that, we deal with the unknown and we do not know who we're pulling over. We don't know who's going to answer the door at that domestic. We don't know who's going to be at that business on the alarm drop. Bad guys, that's air quotes, don't wear shirts that say, hey, I'm a bad guy. We don't know. So when someone's pulled over, it's for them, for the violator, it might be their only interaction with law enforcement. For us, you might be the 12th car we've pulled over that shift. So we try to remind our officers, hey, treat everybody as if it's the first car you stopped. It's the first time they've ever had any interaction with the police. Understand that they don't know what we want them to know in all cases, right? Like in our world, we pull you over, you keep your hands visible, you don't reach for anything, you wait till we get up there. If it's nighttime, you turn your dome lights on, roll your windows down. That puts us at ease, but not everybody's going to do that. Not everybody's required to do that. So if we don't see that compliance, right, we're going to be probably a little more cautious until we get to kind of feel you out, evaluate or observe you, and get an idea of who we're dealing with. If it starts off in a negative tone, or if it starts off adversarial, it's very hard for anybody then to just flip a switch and calm down. So I think we have made some strides in that area with community outreach and trying to remind folks what to do when they get pulled over. But we don't know who's in that car, who's at that house, who's at that business. We don't know what you're an upstanding guy. You support law enforcement. I stop you tonight driving down the street. Yeah, I don't know who you are. You know who you are, but I don't. So sometimes just remembering that, and law enforcement officers are human. We're human. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to say things that might not always make sense, but for the most part, we do a really, really, really good job. I'm proud of us.
Well, you're preaching to the choir, so to speak. It's I try to articulate on these podcasts that police officers are brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. They have bad days, and they have good days. And if you've ever had a boss, who had a fight with his wife, that's going to be a tough day for you. Imagine if you're a police officer and then you have to go up and deal with someone who's not particularly respectful. It's not and to your point, it's the highest level of professionalism, because you have to kind of control yourself. You have to kind of get through it and not let your emotions get the best of you. So it is one of the, if not the toughest professions. Unfortunately, I only have one last question, because I'd love to sit on this thing for another hour and just keep chatting. But the last question for you, Chief Hughes, is it's really a thank you. Thank you for joining us, sharing your perspectives.
Thanks for having me.
We try to make a small donation. Pepper Ball does to the charity of your choice. What charity can we make a donation to in your name?
Bob, I am honored to sit on the board of directors for the National Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame. The National Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame is designed to do exactly what the title suggests, and that is recognize officers across this country who have gone above and beyond in the line of duty, as well as recognizing some of those who are no longer with us. So my charity of choice would undoubtedly be the National Law Enforcement Officer Hall of Fame. The induction ceremony is coming up in April in Fort Worth, Texas, and we would be honored to have your listeners support that organization, come to the induction ceremony, partake in any way they can. That'd mean a lot.
Oh, that's great. That's a great venue for our a way to say thank you. Well, folks, this has been just a really educational, I think is the right word for it. What I really appreciated about Chief Hughes is that he speaks plainly, and you talk about the only good-looking use of force, or a normal use of force, is one that's inside a training facility. Every time you see a body cam, you're going to see a messy situation, because it is messy, and it's messy because you're putting officers out in harm's way who have to make split-second decisions about how to engage with typically what you see in body cams. Unfortunately, you typically see people who are not letting the officer do what he or she is designed or is instructed to do, and that is to gain control of a situation. And absent of control or compliance, those messy things happen. And what we learned today is this: the use of force is escalation, but it's escalation based off what the subject does, frankly, not necessarily and typically not what the officer does. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I think we learned was, I loved his analogy of a professional team. If you think about a professional player who only has to catch fly balls and ground balls, who gets thousands of hours of training. You have officers who get hundreds of hours of training who have to deal with thousands of different situations. Imagine it would be like 1,000 different pitches coming your way that you may only see once in your career. no way to really prepare for that. And to some degree, I think we just have to have, as I always say, a lot of empathy for what these officers go through when they put their lives on the line and their lives and by definition their families at risk.
So wrapping up, again, you've been listening and hopefully enjoyed listening to me. My name is Bob Plaschke, and this is First Response. It is a podcast dedicated to understanding the stories behind the people that wear a badge, who the very brave first responders, more than 1 million out there in the United States. And I am very privileged that this is sponsored by Pepperball, the company that I have the honor to be the CEO of. And again, Pepperball, we deploy non-lethal tools that allow police officers to do their jobs, but not have to use their guns and not have to suffer and keep themselves and the public that they serve safe. Until next time, appreciate it and be safe out there.